Welcome to Porsche Patter with Bracken Helms, the show where we hear Bracken and his distinguished guests from the Porsche community patter on about Porsches and all things automotive. Porsche Patter is sponsored by Circuit 64. Circuit 64 creates authentic automotive apparel made for like-minded automotive enthusiasts. The links for Circuit 64 are in the show notes. Okay, let's get to it.
Jerry Woods, Part 3. Again, this is done with older audio, so the audio's not as good as it is now in my newer interviews. And also because it's an older interview, you hear him talk about Tesla towards the end. I think if it was done now, he would pick a different EV, but that's just me being biased because Tesla's not my favorite EV. I also like the conclusion that he's come up with on how he can tell the drivers that have it and the drivers that don't. He said he was always told that it was seat time, but he's come up with a different conclusion. Anyway, here's part 3.
Favorite track or race?
Favorite track? In the United States, it's Elkhart Lake, Road America in Wisconsin. And in Europe, it's Spa. And the favorite race, for me, the favorite race would be... I've had a lot of really good races that I enjoyed. We did this race with a 944 at Mossport, 24-hour race one year.
That's in Canada?
Yeah. It was a 24-hour race, and we finished second. And normally you hear that, second sucks.
Yeah.
But we raced our heart out. Strategically, we got in the car into first place. The car we were racing against was a Sailing Mustang, and the lead driver in the Sailing Mustang was Skeeter McKittrick, who had driven up for us with the 935s, and so we knew Skeeter, and we'd hang out pit boards, to him, slow down, and he'd come by and he'd give us the finger, and we were, and at the beginning of the race, because of fueling and the way you had to fuel with a 1-inch nozzle, so it would be really slow. And they'd get to fuel under yellows, and we'd always end up having to fuel under green. So we were getting kind of hosed by the pit strategy. Nothing that you could change. If somebody has a crash and there's a yellow flag and we'd just filled up, we were kind of like, well, damn, And so as the race progressed in a 24-hour race, things change. And we finally got to the point where we were catching them. Their tires weren't holding up. They were running on, I forget what brand of tire. It was an off-name tire. And they'd go 45 minutes and their tires were toast when they were being pushed. So they'd have to come in and change tires, and we were just going. And we had a couple Canadian kids driving that were really good. We kept them in the car, and I could see that we were going to pass them. We finally passed them. We took the lead, and, it was like 4 hours to go or 3 hours to go. And, we had them. We knew we had them, and then all of a sudden we had an axle. The CV joint went bad, and we had to come in and change an axle. It took us 8 minutes, and then we finished second. Just the strategy of it, the fact that we were able to get to the point, and it was kind of fun. That was a fun race. 24-hour races, I remember in 1977, we went with Dick down to the Daytona, the end of the year, every year in November. They had a short race, and that was an award banquet. That's when I got my trophy. And we went to dinner with Dick Barbour and Bob and some other people. I was invited, and Jim Busby was there at the dinner. And I was just a mechanic sitting there enjoying dinner. And Jim was going on about, man, these 24-hour races, I don't have the guys that work on those cars for 24 hours, they must have rocks in their head. How do they do that? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh, my God, what have I got myself into, Jim was painting this just ugly presentation of what it would be like to be a mechanic on a 24-hour race. And I'm like, oh, geez, Jim, what have you done to me, And then I got into the point where I enjoyed 24-hour races. In 1986, I did 6 of them in 1 year. We did 4 with the Firehawk cars, the 944s. With the 944s, we ran Nelson Ledges 24 hours, Watkins Glens for 24 hours, Mossport for 24 hours. There was one other one that escapes me right now. But then I did Sebring Le Mans 24 hours and Daytona 24 hours. So I was all in about doing 24-hour races. I was younger then.
Yeah. What race car do you wish you could have been a part of?
That I wasn't?
Yeah.
Probably the Moby Dick 935.
Okay. When you formed JWE, it was with Rich Walton. That's Gary Walton's son, who was also the driver of the autocross car, right?
Yes. Gary was a very talented driver. He didn't ever go road racing. He chose to have a family and raise four kids instead of... And that same thing happened to Bob Garretson. Bob didn't start racing until way late because he had kids and he had a responsibility to raise a family, So, and Gary did that rather than go racing. Racing can be expensive.
With Garretson Enterprise, there were catalog sales, autocross, engine for midgets, tuner, Pikes Peak, IMSA, Dick Barbour cars. You guys here at Jerry Woods, you guys are a similar thing because you're a tuner for guys that want to hop up their cars. You're also into racing with spec cars and GTL and vintage and cup cars. You also have an engine class. Do you feel it's a similar thing?
Yeah, it is.
And you guys do driver coaching? Some of these notes I wrote a long time ago.
Yeah, we do. At the business, my partner, Gary, Gary, he inherited Gary's talent. And I say inherited. Yeah. A lot of people talk about, well, why don't you drive? And I said, well, once upon a time, I was autocrossing with Gary and Rich. We'd go to an autocross. If I was within 5 seconds on a 45-second autocross course at Pleasanton, I felt like I did really good. Because and Gary would explain to me everything like it was an absolute slow motion. No, wait a minute. When I was out there, it was like, and I said, wait a minute. How come... Everybody says, well, it's seat time. There's this whole thing about the more time you spend, the better you get. And I said, well, wait a minute. I've worked with professional drivers for years with the 935s, later on with Ferrari 333s. I worked for a team that was based out of Ohio as a weekend warrior. And, it's like, what makes the difference? And it hit me. And I told at that time, that was back in the day, I said, Gary was born with a Pentium 2 and I was born with an 8080 processor. My brain just doesn't compute. It's a speed of how your brain processes the information, what your eye sees and how you respond. To him, everything was in slow motion. To me, I couldn't process stuff that fast. And with pro drivers, it's, you look at it and it's an inherited trait. That's why I said Rich, he didn't have any seat time. He's just a 16, 17-year-old kid, and he's as fast as his dad. Why is that? No seat time involved. It's what you inherit. And then you look at families of racers, Andretti's, Schumachers, Unsers. That's an inherited trait of how your brain. And somebody said when I was explaining this whole thing one time, they said, well, they did a similar study on football quarterbacks. And Joe Montana could process information faster than any other quarterback in the field. The information your eyes see goes to the brain and what you do with that. How fast can you process that information? And not everybody is born with that. So I was not born with that. When I go skiing, I go dun 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 down the mountain, and Rich goes whew. I just don't go fast. I don't do anything fast. I ride my bicycle. I go slow.
So when you first started here, though, you pretty much did you start just in one area, or you pretty much did everything to begin with?
Primarily, I started doing engines and gearboxes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it expanded.
So I read an article in Excellence about your dominating Spec 911. But what is a GTL car?
Well, the Spec 911 was based on a 3-liter engine. And our concept when we built that was to have kind of put the build of the car within a financial box. The engine had to be stock pistons and cylinders, stock cams, 1.5-inch headers, 40-millimeter butterflies, and it would make 250 horsepower at 6,500 RPM. The key to the cost of racing is if an engine runs to 8,000 RPM, it's 20 hours. Every 20 hours you rebuild the motor. If it runs to 6,500 RPM, every 4 years you're rebuilding the motor. So the RPM limit really affects, that affects budget. tires. At the time when Spec 911 started, they were running 7 and 8 Toyo street tires. You could buy a set of tires for $800. A set of Michelin race tires is $2,500. So that affected it. So the Spec 911 was born out of trying to put cost in a box that was affordable for a local racer. The brake package that we built used stock production discs. They're $85 a piece versus a racing disc that might cost $250. And brakes are consumables. So work with something inexpensive. And then the GTL was kind of the next step up from that. It was a 3.6 motor, but then again, we designed a system where it made peak power at 7,000. It made about 320 horsepower. So more power, and then it had bigger tires and wheels and race rubber. So it was more like an RSR. It was kind of the next step up, but not crazy money. So that's what the GTL was all about.
Okay. So how many different classes? I went on your website, and you have like 3 or 4 different?
Well, another one kind of grew out in the middle called and the people involved with making it wasn't Jerry Woods Enterprises, a collective group. Other competitors, they came up with what they called GTU, which was a 3.2 motor with race tires, kind of a halfway in betweener.
Okay. What can you tell me about your Cup car?
That was not a car I was really involved with. We had a customer that bought the Cup car, and then he let Rich drive it for a season, and he won the championship for the Pearly Cup, which was a local West Coast deal that year. We didn't do much. In the Cup car, the engines and all that were all controlled by Porsche Motorsports, North America. So we didn't do anything with that. Basically, we just serviced the car and took it to the races.
Do you still do your engine classes?
No, I don't. I kind of, when Bruce got sick, it was really Bruce's class, and I aided. But, when Bruce got sick and passed away, I stopped doing the engine classes.
Okay, so your driving coaching is not for the average Joe, it's for race car drivers or what?
Yeah, and we have either Rich or another guy, a local guy from Thomas Merrill, who handle that for us.
What's the most exciting car you've dealt with? I guess I kind of asked you about the race car, so this is like more street car.
Yeah, street cars. Maybe that Canepa car, that 89 Speedster. When we put the 962 motor in it, that was a pretty exciting car. Yeah. That was an exciting car. And I would be driving it while the guy was tuning it and working on the tuning, because what you do on the dyno, sometimes you have to do more on the road. And again, I'm not a driver, but we'd be out on Highway 1 north of Santa Cruz, and with very little effort, we'd be doing 140 miles an hour. It was like, whoa! But the car was really well balanced. Bruce built it, and a fabricator. They did all the chassis work. I built the engine and the transmission in the car. They married the two, and then we went tested it, and it was an exciting car, really exciting car. And the lawyer flew up from Vegas, and Bruce took him out for a ride. And there's a section of road south of Santa Cruz going towards Watsonville where it gets really wide. And Bruce hauled ass. And he called me up and he goes, I couldn't see the speedometer, but I was doing 7,200 or 7,300 RPM in fifth gear. How fast is that? Well, I'd done the gears, and I knew the gear chart. And I go, 205. We made over 200 miles an hour, so we're good. Can you imagine that car, 205 miles an hour on Highway 1?
I talked to
I guess he scared the living shit out of the lawyer.
Apparently, I was talking to Rob King, and he did the Silver State one year with like a modified roof. And he said he hit 202 in Nevada. At least that's what he claims. That's what
it's possible.
He broke the tire, like disintegrated. Yeah. One of them. I don't know if it was while he was 200, but he had I can't remember what his average speed was, like 140. And he says it took him like quarter mile or half a mile to like, he never went off the road, but to get it back, like stopped from like out of control.
There's a couple cars that people have been killed on that event because ZR rated tires aren't rated for that speed, and the tires that come apart.
Yeah,
that's a big problem.
What do you like about your job?
Design, innovation. Currently, that's what I really enjoy doing.
PDK or manual?
Oh, boy. I'm getting old, so I say PDK.
What cool cars have you owned?
A 914.6.
Any you regret selling?
There were times that I think the 914.6, but, in the end result, no. Now I own a Volkswagen Alltrack station wagon.
Any you regret not buying?
Ooh. I did co-own with Bob Garretson a 906 one time. Maybe that's the one I guess when Martin always says, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. And Bob and I sold the 906. I think I doubled my money on it, which is, from an investment standpoint, was fine. But we sold it for $25,000, and now they're what, $1.5 million.
Yeah. Did you drive it?
No, it was just a pile of parts.
Oh, okay.
It was, I built the motor for it, and it was an all original motor, and the motor and transmission were good to go, but the car itself had been converted into a Berg Spider and didn't have any of the original body work, and we would have had to, get the new body work and then put it on. It was a bigger project than either one of us had either time or mainly time to do it. And then we would have had to store the car. There's no regrets for selling it, but it's ifs and buts for candy and nuts. We don't have a Merry Christmas.
If you could have any car today, what would it be?
I kid sometimes about if I won the lottery, I'd buy a Tesla, and I'd put a trailer hitch or a trailer hitch on the back of the car, and I'd put a Honda generator on there and have my own personal hybrid car.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of e-cars, but it's coming.
Which vehicle would you buy at a Porsche dealership if you had to buy a brand new one today?
I'm going to go against my grain on electric cars, but maybe the new Taycan Turbo S.
Yeah.
That sounds like it might be a real kick in the ass car.
Favorite air-cooled car?
914.6.
Favorite water-cooled Porsche?
Oh, none. Water and Porsche are like oil and water. They should never have been mixed.
What do you like about working with Porsches?
Quality.
What do you like about the air-cooled cars?
Simplicity.
What do you like about the water-cooled cars?
Not much. I mean, Rich gives me a hard time because I always say, water engines or water Porsches shouldn't exist. But he says there were many water-cooled Porsches that you worked on, like 935s had water in the intercoolers, 962s were water-cooled. All right, I have to say, okay. But, in general, I'm kind of an air-cooled guy.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, comment, like, and share with your friends. Feel free to send questions or suggestions to the email in the description of the show. Special thanks to our sponsor, Circuit 64. Goodbye for now. We hope we can get together again for our next episode. Now get out there and enjoy the cars and the people.